I love horses and ponies, those beautiful animals who have been our working and friendship companions for millennia. They have accompanied us through our growth as societies and communities, and in our darkest hours they have been there with us. But there are some horses we really wouldn't want to meet on our strolls, and today I will tell you a little of some of these. Horses have been our loyal companions for millennia. They have been with us as humans and learned to farm, and as we travelled and traded, they have been our constant companions through strange lands, in our sports and as treasured pets. And they have been with us in our darkest hours too, during the times of war and bloodshed, used literally as workhorses in some of the hardest and cruelest work, used for our leisure, often to their detriment. And yet these beautiful creatures have such a trusting and healing nature, their use in therapeutic medicine has proved invaluable. Long live these noble animals. However, today I am going to tell you of a different type of horse from folklore, not those noble animals who have been our companions, of heroes and heroines, but the waterhorses. Dangerous creatures who lead humans to their doom in the dark depths of deep and still water. Tread carefully, friends. We will take a quiet look at these beasts now, but be careful not to make a sound. The Nuckalavee. In the Orkney Isles of northern Scotland we may come across the Nuckalavee, a demon horse with characteristics of both a horse and a human. Even the prolific folklore collector and collator Catherine Briggs considered these the nastiest of all the demons of Scotland's northern isles. Islanders dreaded meeting this waterhorse, a sea creature intolerant of freshwater rivers and streams, and so if being chased, one of the easiest ways to escape would be to jump or swim through fresh running water. The Nuckalavee will not dare to enter this at all. Likewise, during periods of rain, he will not come onto the land. The only being able to control the beast is the Mither of the Sea, a powerful Orkney fairy creature, possibly once a goddess. It is she who keeps the Nuckalavee locked away during the summer months of the year, kept deep in the rough seas off Orkney. His name comes from the Orkney word Nuckalavee, meaning devil of the sea. On the Shetland Isles he is Nuckalavee, and here the locals thought of him as a sea trow or a sea devil, such was his evil reputation. The fear of this beast was so profound that even to mention its name would cause the Orcadians to mutter a prayer for safety. Just the mere breath of the beast would cause crops to wither and die. The cattle and sheep of the farms would sicken if breathed upon. The Nuckalavee also had the power to bring epidemic and drought. Part of the farming calendar was to burn seaweed gathered on the shore, a tradition said to have begun on Stronsay in 1722. Soda ash, the resulting ash from the burning, would then be used to add alkalinity to the acidic soils, and so make it easier for farming. Of course, as the commercial manufacturing of the Industrial Revolution progressed, the ash was needed for soap and glass making, among other things, and so the burnings happened more and more. The strong smell of burning seaweed was said to cause great anger and rage in the Nuckalavee. In his fury, he would bring about plague, blight, destruction and failure of the crops and the deaths of the livestock. On Stronsay he infected the whole island with a deadly disease, mortashine. This sickness, deadly to horses, known today as glanders, a bacterial respiratory infection causing suffering and fatality. There are many tales of the Nuckalavee that have been recorded in history even as far back as the 1500s, and yet although this is a sea creature, the stories all focus on its appearances on land, and these are very detailed and strange accounts. There was a man named Tamas, known as rough and foolhardy, who, after much encouragement due to his trauma, told his tale to folklorist Denison of his encounter with the Nuckalavee. After much cajoling, the man explained that he had been out late in the night. It was moonless but clear and the sky was full of stars. The path took him by the seashore on one side and a freshwater loch on the other. A strange shape was starting to approach him, something unnatural and sinister looking. He had been taught not to turn his back on threatening things, as that would make him too vulnerable. Instead, he begged a blessing of protection from the Lord and faced the thing that was getting closer. Tamas told Denison that the beast he came across had the torso of a man that blended with the body of a horse-like creature. Its arms were able to reach the floor. Its legs ended in flippers instead of hooves. Tamas described the beast as having two heads, one human-like and one horse-like. The horse head breathed a toxic fume that came from its gaping mouth and a single flame-red eye. The human head of the monster was huge, enormous and rolling back and forth as though with no strength of its own. The beast had no skin, but black blood could be seen pumping through yellow veins, powerful raw muscles working hard as the monster moved. This is a gruesome description, and yet other tales change this description. Sometimes only the human head is described. All accounts, though, tell that it is an incredibly strong and terrifying beast. At this point, Tamas remembered the Nuckalavee detested fresh water, and so he edged closer to the loch side of the road. The beast approached the man, its gaping mouth opened wide, arms reaching to grab him. Tamas had stumbled into the loch and his feet splashed the fresh water onto the air, hitting the front leg of the monster. It reared up, and it swerved away. At this, Tamas took flight, running down the road, the beast in hot pursuit and its voice like the roar of the sea. In front of Tamas he could see a small stream. He had to reach it. He could hear the monster almost behind him, and he took a great leap over the stream as the beast's long arms swung out. The beast grabbed Tam's bonnet, but nothing more, and it did not cross the water. Tamas was safe and collapsed senseless to the ground. The Ceffyl deer. In Wales we find the Ceffyl deer waterhorse, who lives in mountain pools and waterfalls, rivers and haunts the seashore. Unlike the Nuckalavee, this creature does look more like a horse, grey or black, but with a pure white mane. It will follow unsuspecting tired travellers, trying to encourage them to jump, rest their weary feet and take a ride for a while. And yet as soon as the victim has mounted this strange beast, it might fly into the air and when high enough evaporate to mist, the rider falling to the earth and their doom. Or it may take to its heels, galloping impossibly fast, the rider clinging on to its mane for dear life. It has been known that in some circumstances the Ceffyl deer would allow itself to be captured and would work for a time as a normal horse, perhaps building up the confidence of its owner. Eventually one day it would try to escape while working and possibly drag the owner to their death. Each area of Wales would have a slightly different description of the Ceffyl deer. In the north the beast was full of evil, terrifying, red eyes blazing like fire and deadly. In the south, though, it was less ominous and dangerous, more of a nuisance than anything. However, this luminous-looking waterhorse could also help travellers who were exhausted, and in this way is more of a gentle fairy animal. There is a tale told of a man who was travelling by foot through the Welsh countryside. Exhausted, he stopped for a while by a waterfall to rest. From the water stepped a grey horse with a white mane, and it stepped towards him. With a sigh of relief, he stroked the horse and was pleased that it let him climb onto its sturdy back. As soon as he was on the horse, though, it took off at a speed that shocked him. Impossibly fast, and the countryside flew by at an unnatural pace. Finally the horse bucked him off onto the floor, and to his incredulity he found he had travelled most of Wales in only 1 hour. Another story from the 1800s tells of an older man slowly walking home one dark night in winter. Not too far away he saw before him a horse, small, pony-sized, but being ridden by a man with very long legs, and the horse seemed to be glowing. The man tried to catch up to the horse, but it always managed to be just that little bit further away. On and on this went, with the old man trying to catch up to the rider and the pony. Soon the man came near to a place with an old mill, and the man was astonished as both horse and rider completely vanished. The man carried on his way home, but was horrified to learn not long after that he had left the valley. The whole area was covered by a huge flood, and to his dying day he gave credit to the Ceffyl who he must have been trying to catch up to, for saving his life and leading him from the dangerous waters. In the folklore of Ceffyl, it was told that members of the clergy were the only ones who could ride this fairy horse safely. In one story from the 1700s, a parson and his parish clerk were walking home from Cardiff. They came upon a horse left alone in the middle of nowhere, and decided they would mount and ride it home. They would be home faster, and the horse would be safe. During the ride, the clerk mentioned to the vicar what a fine ride this was, how incredibly fast this horse was. The horse reared a little, and the vicar hushed the clerk. However, once again the clerk opened his mouth, and at this the Ceffyl bucked him off the back and sped away with the parson, all the way to the home, leaving the clerk on the stony pathway. The Glashtin, or Cabyl Ushtey. On the Isle of Man, the very fairy-filled place full of strange folklore, lives the Glashtin, or the Cabyl Ushtey. This is a strange goblin type of creature that lives in the waters here and takes the form of a waterhorse, or sometimes a creature that looks part bull, part horse. This waterhorse is a pest, frequenting the edges of rivers and lakes at night, victimising women travelling through the countryside, sometimes shape-shifting to a handsome man, but with horse's ears. And this man will just not leave the women travelling alone until he eventually loses patience and drags them out to sea. The sound of a rooster crowing will cause the Cabyl Ushtey to disappear, or maybe her cutting off her skirt hem to break his spell. Like other water horses once on land, they look perfectly normal, like regular horses and ponies until you look at their feet. Their hooves are backwards. Manx water horses are known for loving to mingle with native horses and ponies, wandering among them and sometimes breeding mixed foals with truly equine mares. Once the people of the isle started to breed their native ponies with other breeds from off the island, the Glashtin seemed to have taken umbrage, and they were rarely seen again. Once the Glashtin, in guise of a man, took a woman who was travelling alone. He grabbed at her dress in a vice-like grip and would just not let her go. She followed him trapped until at night he fell asleep, and at this she cut her dress and ran away, and left him only with a handful of cloth that she saw him throw away while shouting curses in the Manx language. Once a dark and very handsome stranger came to a fisherman's daughter who lived near Scarlet. She managed to outwit this flirtatious fellow, who had not managed to disguise his ears. It was a dark and stormy night when Cabyl, the fisherman's daughter, allowed a handsome stranger to rest in their home until the storm finished. Her father was still away, and she knew she had made a huge mistake, because she had seen, when he settled down, that his ears were horses' ears. The man tried to flirt with her, to tempt her, showing her a strand of beautiful pearls he would give her, if only she would just follow him. But she would not be fooled, and as he grabbed for her, she screamed and the cock crowed in alarm. The Glashtin was shocked. Surely morning must be here. The horseman fled in terror, even though the dawn was actually a long, long way off in time. Backahastan the Brook horse. A creature of Scandinavian mythology, the brook horse was a beautiful white horse that would emerge from bodies of water, such as lakes or ponds. It would attempt to lure children into riding on its back so it could gallop back into the water, where the children would be drowned. The Backahast was often described as a majestic white horse, appearing near rivers, particularly during foggy weather. Anyone who climbed onto this horse's back could not get off. The horse would jump into the river, drowning the rider. The brook horse could also be harnessed and made to plough, either because it was trying to trick the person or because the person had tricked the horse. The following tale is a good illustration of the brook horse. A long time ago there was a girl who was not only pretty but also big and strong. She worked as a maid on a farm by Lake Hjartjarðsön in southern Nerike. She was ploughing with the farm's horse on one of the fields by the lake. It was springtime and beautiful weather. The birds were chirping and the wagtails flitted in the girl's and the horse's tracks to pick worms. All of a sudden a horse appeared from the lake, big and beautiful, bright in colour with large spots on the sides. The horse had a beautiful mane fluttering in the wind and a tail that trailed to the ground. It pranced for the girl to show her just how handsome it was. However, the girl knew that this must be a brook horse and ignored it. The brook horse came closer and closer, and finally he was so close that he could bite the farm horse in the mane. The girl hit the brook horse with the bridle and cried, "Disappear, you scoundrel, or you'll have to plough, so you'll never forget it." As soon as she had said this, the brook horse changed places with the farm horse, and the brook horse started ploughing the field with such a speed that soil and stones whirled in its wake, and the girl hung like a mitten from the plough. Faster than the cock crows 7 times, the ploughing was finished and the brook horse headed for the lake, dragging both the plough and the girl. But the girl had a piece of steel in her pocket, and she made the sign of the cross with it. Immediately she fell down on the ground and saw the brook horse disappear into the lake, taking the whole plough with it. She heard a frustrated neighing when the brook horse understood his trick had failed. And until this day, a deep track can still be seen in the field. The Kelpie. The Kelpie can be found in Scotland and Ireland, a water creature living by the many lochs and lofts and rivers. The name is thought to be an anglicised version of the Scots Gaelic word for the colt or the pony. It is said to look like a black horse and yet can also shapeshift to human form, somewhat unkempt and rather hairy, but often quite beautiful, although many times the hooves remain where the feet should be. In this way the Kelpie gained an association with the devil. Robert Burns spoke of this in his poem, Address to the Devil. When thou's dissolve the snowy hoard, and float the jingling icy board, then water kelpies haunt the ford, by your direction, and 90 travellers are allured to their destruction. The Kelpie and its habits of living by or in water has often been debated by folklorists. Often the folklore of the Uisge blends or is confused with that of the Kelpie. Of course, earlier folklore collectors would be translating Gaelic to English, and mistakes are easily made in translations, and hence the confusion in both the folklores. All lore, though, describes the black horse as beautiful and majestic, hunting for unwitting humans who have strayed too near its home. In Orkney it is spoken of as having a serpent-like mane. The Kelpie of the River Spey is said to have a most beautiful singing voice. It was Walter Gregor, the folklorist and early folklore society member, who described this waterhorse as seeking out humans, sometimes for companionship, more often to lure them into the deep, dark water, eat them and throw the human remains back out of the water to the river or lochside edges. This is a canny hunter, able to stretch the whole length of its back to take more and more riders prisoner, to take more and more victims to the depths for its prey. And sadly, these human victims are most usually children who have been playing too close to the water edge. In many of the folklore tales, only one child will remain on shore, watching as his or her companions mount the lovely black horse, one by one, strangely all able to fit, and then watch as the horse leaps into the water, taking with it all of the innocent victims. In many of these tales the child had reached to pet the horse's neck, and their hand or fingers had become stuck to the Kelpie flesh, and in desperation and panic they had cut off their own fingers to free themselves before being dragged into the water. It is John F. Cabyl who collected a story and recorded it in his book of The Bridge of the Kelpies, and this told of a group or a herd of these fairy creatures. This same story of the Kelpies being described similar to imps was also collected by Charlotte Dempster. The story of how these creatures were tired of struggling across the Dornoch Firth in cockleshell boats, and so had built a beautiful bridge instead. An unwitting human, unknowing of fairy lore, blessed the bridge and the Kelpies for all their hard work, as this would also help the communities. And at this the whole bridge collapsed into the water, this part of the Firth becoming a very dangerous stretch of quicksand and currents to this day. The foals born of horses and Kelpies were said to be short-eared things, impossible to drown, although why one would want to I have no idea. As we have learned, the Kelpies can shapeshift into human form, and these too are reputed to be beautiful individuals. Often there are water reeds caught in their long black hair. One Kelpie human tale tells though of the fairy horse taking the shape of an old man, wizened in face, mumbling to himself as he sat on a bridge sewing. Something was just not right about this stranger. He was obviously fey, and so one of the locals passing over the bridge hit him with his own staff, and at this the old man regained his horse form and leaped back into the watery depths. The weakest spot of the Kelpie is its necklace, if in human form, or of course a bridle if in equine form. To grab hold of or remove this will render the Kelpie helpless and a servant of he or she who keeps the necklace or the bridle. In this way, the Kelpie can be used for the most difficult of farm work, or seemingly the most impossible of tasks. It is, after all, a fairy horse. One tale from Barra tells of a male Kelpie who fell in love with a beautiful local girl, and this fairy creature determined she would become his wife. And so in human form he flirts with her, and eventually he falls asleep by her, not realising she knows full well that he is a Kelpie, and she is just biding her time. Once he is sound asleep, she gently takes the silver necklace from around his neck, and now she has all the power over him, because she has taken his bridle. Instantly he transforms back to his horse form, and she guides him back to her father's farm, where the Kelpie must work as a farm horse for a full year. Once the year is over, the girl jumps on the back of the Kelpie horse and rides it to a local wise man. And here she asks what should she do with the Kelpie now? she is told to give the Kelpie its silver necklace back, and the spell will be broken. Once the Kelpie has his silver necklace, it transforms once more into the handsome young man, and the wise old man asks the Kelpie, would he like to remain a human or a horse forever? Still in love with this farm girl, he asks her if she would become his wife, and blushing she agrees, and the Kelpie chooses to remain a male man for his whole long life and marry his beautiful maiden. In the great majority of Kelpie folklore tales, the horses transform to male humans. Only very few of them transform to female. One tale of a Kelpie in female human form tells us that she stood tall, a withered thing all dressed in green, and a face distorted by a constant evil scowl. In this tale, the Kelpie overpowered a man and a boy, taking their lives as they were walking by the stream where she had lived. This story reminds me of Jenny Greenteeth cautionary tales, and also the description of the Faerie female fits too. It was said that the Kelpies could be caught and put to work. To do this, a bridle would have to be fashioned and stamped with the symbol of the cross. Kelpies have an unnatural equine strength which could be put to good use. One Scottish lord, the Laird of Morphy, caught a Kelpie and used it to transport the heavy stones to build his castle. Once the laird had finished, though, once he had used the Kelpie for all the hard work, he released it from its bounds, and instantly that Kelpie placed a curse upon him and all of his lineage as punishment. In this way the line of the Laird of Morphy died out. These creatures could also be killed completely, and this would be done using a bullet crafted from silver. The Kelpie will fall down stone dead, and only a strange turf will remain in its place, and a mass of horrible jelly-like substance. Red-hot iron spears or rods could also be used to take the lives of Kelpies, as one blacksmith had to do to protect his own family. They are beautiful, but they can also be deadly. So, if you are ever by a loch or a river in Scotland or a lough in Ireland, don't approach any strange-looking horses or pet them, or your hand might become stuck fast before you know it. Your doom will be there in the cold black waters. The Uisge. This is another Scottish waterhorse from the Highlands, and one often mixed up with the tales of the Kelpies, or often interchangeable, although this equine is said to be much more deadly, the most fierce and vicious. This waterhorse only lives in the seas or the fresh and seawater lochs. It is another shapeshifter, able to appear as a most beautiful horse, or a pony, or maybe a most handsome of men, or even a spectacular huge bird in some tales. Should a fellow who doesn't know the folklore find one of these equines wandering around and decide to mount the horse and take the weight off his human feet, well, the rider had better keep the horse's nostrils away from the scent of any water, because should this waterhorse catch even one smell of salt or fresh water, its hide will become impossibly sticky. The rider is now unable to escape the horse's back. The horse will thunder towards the water, leaping into the darkest depths and taking the human for its prey. Once there, captive in the darkness, the human will be devoured whole, and everything eaten with gusto, except for the hated liver, which will be allowed to drift back to the surface. In human form, these water horses are incredibly handsome, water weeds and soft golden sand caught in their hair, tempting young women to be their lovers, and unknowingly their victims. Highlanders were always incredibly wary of strangers and wild horses wandering near the water edge, because who knew what they really were? Cattle and sheep were incredibly important to Highlander society. Battles were fought over herds and flocks. Reivers, local cattle thieves, were a nightmare to the communities, and these communities needed all the milk and cream and hide and wool and meat and fat of these animals to survive harsh Highland life. Along with these human predators and problems also came the Faerie ones. The Uisge loved to take the odd cow or bullock or ram or ewe as food. However, this could also be a weak point for the waterhorse, as the roasting of the meat could be a way of preparing a trap. One tale tells of a blacksmith whose daughter was taken by one of these waterhorses, and he would have his revenge. He and his son set a trap of cooking meat by the loch where they knew the monster lived, and as the scent of the meat wafted over the water, a mist appeared in the centre of the loch. It was the Uisge. Now they caught the beast with sharp hooks that they had been heating over the fire, and they killed it, taking their revenge and leaving only a mass of jelly where once stood the waterhorse. This fairy animal has a desire for human women, and should one spy a woman it wanted, she has no chance of escape. They are completely relentless. In one story, a young woman was herding her cattle over the moorlands, and she came across a stunningly beautiful young fellow. They sat and they talked, and the courting began. Finally, the stranger fell asleep, his beautiful head laid gently upon her lap, and in his slumber he stretched and moved, and it was now she noticed his feet were not feet at all, but strong, dark and powerful hooves. She managed to slip from under him, leaving him lying on the turfs, and ran all the way back home. She was lucky. The desire of these creatures is fickle, and lust can turn to anger in a moment, and the woman could just have easily been eaten alive. Finally, we come to one of my favourite sources of fairy lore, the collected folklore of Ireland. And I will tell you the accounts of the waterhorses recorded there, and in the words of the tellers of the tales themselves. There is a lake 5 or 6 miles east of Clifton town. One day there was a man going around the place looking for his horse. Suddenly he saw a horse jumping from the lake, and the man ran to the horse because he thought it was his own. When he reached the horse, he looked at it, but it was not his own horse. It did not belong to any person in the district for miles around. He took it home and had it working every day for a long time. One day he was leaving the horse in the field. When he let her loose, it ran into the lake and he jumped into it. And after that, the people said that that was a waterhorse. One day there was a man going up the hill after his sheep, and he saw this white horse, and he knew that no one in the village owned the horse. So he left the horse there, and every day that he went to the hill, the horse was there. This day the man said that he would take the horse. He took the horse, and he had for a long time working and everything. He used to bring the horse to the lake for a drink, and he was riding the horse this day, and he brought her for a drink. And when she had the drink taken, she made one jump out into the lake. The man went out into the lake, also on the horse's back, and he was drowned. People were wondering where he was all the time. One day this man was getting water in the lake, and he saw the body on the brink of the lake, and he ran off and told his friends. In 5 or 10 minutes' time, there were a lot of people around him, and they did not know who he was for a while. So one man knew him and said it was the man, and other people said it was not the man. He was a terrible gambler, and his clothes were on him, and they were in pieces. One of the people put his hand into the man's pocket, and there they found a pack of cards. So they knew him then, and they knew his clothes. They brought him off and buried him. There was a woman rowing a boat on Carthon Lake. There was a man standing on the brink. He saw the head of a horse appearing over the water. The monster looked at the man, and he shouted at the woman to row quickly out of the lake. She looked back and saw that the monster, but he had seen her first and followed her. She landed on the shore, and the lake horse disappeared again below the water. The woman died before a year had passed. So there, my friends, we have some tales of water horses, and as much as I love equines and horses and ponies and such beautiful animals, I do not want to meet one of these strange creatures. They are strange indeed and tempting, and I always have the urge to pet any horse or pony I come across. But I must be careful in future. I am hoping to add more content this year to the channel. We aren't monetized, so it's slow going on the channel. However, it's a passion and a hobby, and I love it, and so does Mark, and so we carry on. Thank you so much, dear friends, for following all of our adventures through the world of Faerie. There'll be a few changes this year, but all for the better, and more of that in months to come. Anyway, for now, dear friends, take care, brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk, and don't play with strange horses, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself.